My name is Brian Wish. I'm an entrepreneur, CEO, and pathfinder. If I've learned anything in life, it's that self-discovery is a critical part of living intentionally, building meaningful relationships, and achieving the future we see for ourselves. In July of 2021, I sold all my possessions, headed west, and began a quest to live a fuller and more meaningful life. The experience helped me truly understand the power of a single moment. And through my conversations with leaders from all walks of life, I've seen how that one phone call, heartbreak, diagnosis, or lost job can transform the entire course of our lives. In this podcast, I sit down with entrepreneurs, influencers, and experts across industries to talk through the events that changed everything. Together, we'll relive the make or break decisions, hard conversations, periods of despair and hope, chance encounters, and everything that followed. Amii Barnard-Bahn is an advisor, coach, and thought leader in law, ethics, and compliance, helping executives get promoted to thrive in the C-suite and helping companies do the right thing. She is a partner at Kaplan Walker LLP, a law firm specializing in compliance and ethics. A former Fortune 5 executive, GC, and CHRO, Amii is a consultant and coach to the C-suite and leaders at global companies like Bank of the West, Adobe, AbbVie, and The Gap. She is a contributor to Harvard Business Review and member of the Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches. Amii has recently been recognized by Thinkers 360 as the #1 global thought leader in both legal and careers. A lifelong diversity advocate, Amii testified for successful passage of the first U.S. laws requiring corporate boards to include women. After a difficult day in the courtroom, Amii found wisdom and direction in an unconventional place, which led her on a journey of self-discovery. Find out how Amii came into her full self today on The One Away Show. Amii, welcome to The One Away Show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you here. What is the one away moment that you want to share with us today?
I thought about this because there have been a few, but really thinking about the pivotal one, it would be back in late 1994 when I was 27. Had to do the math yesterday too. And I was working in a law firm. I had gone to school all my life, worked really hard, felt that I was on a track to something. And for the prior 6 months, I had started to feel like there wasn't a runway for me. And I was one of the only women at a law firm and wasn't really enjoying the work, but I had huge student loans to pay off. So there was pressure to stay in the job and at least, have something to go towards. And I think that my pivotal moment came right around Christmas of that year of 94. I was working on a litigation case and there was a mistake that was made with calendaring. And for people who may or may not know, litigation has a ton of different deadlines. And as a lawyer, you're highly responsible for making sure in your client's best interest that you meet all those deadlines. Otherwise, your client may lose the opportunity to present evidence or ask questions or, do some really important things for their case. Somehow around the holidays, something had gotten missed and a deadline was coming up that was really critical to getting information from the other side about the case. And I did what any good attorney is expected to do. And in the best interest of my client, I requested an extension. And normally you may or may not get those granted. It depends on how nice opposing counsel is. And you never know that until you ask. Every case is different. And this was Christmas and no one was in the office. So I sent a fax basically saying, if I don't hear back from you, I'm going to assume the extension has been granted, which was both in my client's best interests and reasonable, given that no one was potentially there. So I didn't feel great about it because I didn't get the person on the other line, to get the permission. But it kind of is what it is. And they, came into the office and they were furious. We wound up having to go to court over it. And I just remember driving all the way down to Monterey, and a friend came with me because it was a pretty long drive. I went to the hearing. I fought for it. I got it. The other counsel was furious. They felt it was tricky and that I tricked them to get the extension. It was fair play, but I didn't like it. And I couldn't believe there was all this time and all this money being spent, doing this. And then I think you'll find this probably amusing, but my friend and I went to Monterey Aquarium. I don't know if it still has this, but they used to have kind of like a carnival games section right on Cannery Row with
Hmm.
a merry-go-round and some games and stuff. And they had a game, play tic-tac-toe with the chicken. And you put like a quarter in and you literally, play with that. And I lost the game, and I just kind of took that as a sign of like, I'm in the wrong game. And and
Wrong game of the legal.
yeah, of like I'm not like engaged in work that's meaningful. It was just kind of hilarious moment. I can't explain it, but it just, really hit for me. And so talked to my fiance at the time. I was engaged to get married, and mapped out a plan to quit my law firm with no plan. And these huge, 5 figures student loans, which is a lot of money at the time, 20, 30 years ago, but still is a lot of money to me. And so that experience, that just not feeling really comfortable with what I needed to do a good job, and not really enjoying my work, led me to then kind of jump off the cliff and take a break for about a year. I'd never taken a break. I'd always been a go-getter and been running hard in school. And it was the first time I think I'd really given myself permission to explore. I did a bunch of interesting and weird odd jobs for a year. Traveled in Asia, got married, helped start a nonprofit for an arts organization in San Francisco that is still running to this day. It was really a great experience, and I picked up some marketing and communications and PR skills and fundraising from doing that. And then wound up kind of working my way into human resources, which then really set me on the path that I'm on now. I've made a bunch of pivots since then. I've even come back to law, and I'm even a partner at a very different kind of law firm now. And I have 2 businesses. But I would say, when I really was thinking about this week in preparation for our conversation, that was the biggest kind of cliff leap that I've taken.
Yeah.
And it made all the other ones
So
so
it's
much
easy.
easier after that, especially at age 27, doing that. I know you made a big, change also without a big plan, so you can probably relate.
I appreciate you sharing all that with us. It's funny how I feel like I don't want to make your story ordinary or not unique, because it's unique for you, but like people like the law profession really seems to, like, for the right people, really crush the soul, and it like brings you to your knees in these breaking moments. And like for you, I think you were young,
I'm
what I
so
think what's
grateful
fascinating,
that it
like
happened so young. Yeah.
right, like you were young, you had loans, but like you took the call more or less, right? And you could have
Mhm.
kept going and making the money, and probably like clearly it wasn't good for your health, your mind, body, spirit. And you were like, why continue on something that's not even what I want for myself? That's
Yeah, I'd
pretty cool.
always I always have goals. There's always something I'm aiming for, and sometimes it's multiple things. And I don't try to rest my ego or my worth on one thing. As the older I get, the more I've realized that, you should have many things. And if you hit some of them, that's great, right? Because you can over rely on one goal, as I think. But I saw nothing. And that was really existentially scary to me, that I
Mm,
didn't have anything. Like, I
mm.
didn't want to be a partner. I didn't see anyone ahead of me that I really liked or admired.
How old were you, for contexting? Just for
27.
you're 27, still very young in your career. Well, what drove you initially to law school? Like, why did you pick law school to begin
Yeah,
with? And was it
that's
intentional?
that's also a great question. It's a combination of, I wanted to have tools to help change the world. I did a lot of social work, a lot of work with battered women, with disabled populations, reproductive freedom in college. And I knew that would put me on a better footing to be able to empower other people by understanding how to work with the legal system. And then the other less intellectual reason is that I didn't have a plan after graduating from college. And so it was easier just to continue with school, frankly, than
Mm.
to figure out what I was going to do with English degree and Chinese minor.
It just felt like
Um,
the right next best move for you, law school.
it did. Yeah, I had a close friend at the time that was going to law school, and I said, I don't really know what I want to do. It was right around, I don't know, senior fall, when you're supposed to be applying to jobs and whatever. My older daughter is doing that right now, so
Mm.
I'm comparing like, wow, we're in such different places. I had a stay-at-home mom, so I didn't have any mentors. I didn't have anyone to advise me. And I had done waitressing in the summers. I didn't have any big fancy summer jobs that helped me figure it out. And now, having two daughters of my own, I'm very intentional about trying to help coach them, provide them with lots of ideas and thoughtfulness around this. So they've had the types of jobs over the summers that would help them think about, what do I like? What do I not like? Paying attention to that. Like, I really didn't. And I don't think I'm unusual for my generation, unless you were highly connected or you really just knew you wanted to be an engineer. Like, my husband's an engineer, IT, he comes from a long line of engineers. He's happy doing what he's doing. He's always done what he's doing. We're very different that way. I've found that I need to have change every 5 to 6 years. I get bored. I like learning new things. I'm more of an intellectual dilettante, and I like to have a bunch of different things. And I used to think that there's something wrong with me, and that I just hadn't found the one thing. And it took me, that's the advantage to getting older, is you realize, oh, this is just who I am. There isn't just one thing, and there's never going to be just one thing. And luckily, I was able to strategically collect all these different skills and have wonderful colleagues and network and have these great experiences to where now I actually don't have to choose.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting to hear you talk about your experience, and it makes me wonder, it's like what percentage of people in law school, because it's like they absolutely want to be in law school versus like just people logically, it's like this is a path, but not the path. And I think it's but for you, it just eventually made you kind of hit your moment, right? As you described. Now, I want to ask what you did after in a second, or like how it made you rethink. But as you look from your college days in law school to like that first job in law school, you talked about skill sets. What do you think those years, even if it wasn't the exact thing you wanted to be doing, what would you say are like some of the most valuable skills or experiences or things that you learned, let's just say 20 to 27, like pivotal, like the 20s, a defining decade, that book, but it truly is. But what for you, as you look at those 7 years before you quit and say, I got to do something else, what do you think you gained the most during that period?
Really good analytical skills that I use now in my coaching business and back in my law firm in terms of ethical culture work for organizations that I do with my compliance and ethics law firm. An appreciation for the power hierarchy in different organizations. The law firm structure is a particular kind of pyramid structure, as opposed to then other companies that I worked for, which were either completely flat or more corporate, hierarchical, more matrixed. So that was a really helpful experience. The law is actually quite creative, I'd say. And so in that sense, it was a good field. There's a lot of writing. I published a few law review articles before switching into HR and doing other types of writing that I do now. So that was really good. Just really, really good. Honing your writing skills, influence, negotiating, arguing well, having a well-crafted argument is something that you use. And we're always negotiating, really, if you think about it in a big picture sense. And so those were extremely helpful skills.
Great. We're going to break that down. I'm going to give away all the answers later. That's okay with you.
And public speaking. Going into court, I second chaired a jury trial my second year out. That was terrifying and incredible experience. Having to think on your feet, because you never know what the judge is going to say or what the opposing counsel is going to say. So that was a really great skill too.
I appreciate you documenting or articulating kind of what stood out. I'm glad those years have been critical to your years thereafter. It's interesting to think about like what's
I would never call it a mistake. Like,
right. It's not, not a
there's different layers, and I wound up doing lobbying for women on boards, and then I did helped lobby through the Americans with Disabilities Act when I was working at the ACLU legislative office in DC. So I went to Georgetown Law School after college. So those are some of the highlights of my life. I would have never been able to do those if I'd not gone to law school.
You hit this moment, and I know we're finally getting back to it, but how did you begin to what was your process after? How did you begin to rethink your life and as you knew it, what you wanted for yourself, where you were going? I'd love all the answers.
One thing that I did some coaching with a wonderful career coach who specialized in unhappy attorneys trying to figure out what they wanted to do. And
The
she was
niche.
terrific. She was married to a happily practicing attorney. So, she had a full range, which was really, really great perspective. She was much older than me, which is super helpful. I realized that I loved I think when you're a little lost, what helps is thinking about what does bring me joy? When do I feel fulfilled? When do I feel in the zone? And to kind of journal about it, equally with the things you don't like. Sometimes it's harder to really focus in and articulate what we do like, but that's what you need to do, I think, to move forward when something feels off to you. So I found for me that I really enjoyed the advice and counsel when I had clients that were not necessarily litigating, but they needed some proactive, like employment law advice on how to handle a particular situation that had come up. I really enjoyed that. And that led me ultimately, after more research and deep diving into it, it led me into human resources as a career where I could leverage my employment law experience and in a way that was helpful and where I could be in a position to influence the right outcome, regardless of whether it was going to be a pro-employee decision or a pro-employer decision. And I had a wonderful career in HR for about 13 years plus, and then it has woven in and out of my life ever since then. So I would put it, I found that I wanted to help make the facts rather than get stuck with the facts.
Oh, that's good terminology. Make the facts, as in like be part of creating decisions and things that either
Exactly.
impacted employers or employees,
Because when
opposed
you're a
to
lawyer, you're like, well,
you're
this
just
happened and I'm mad about it and I'm going to
Mhm.
sue this person. Or the employer comes to you and they're like, we're getting sued for this thing. And you start getting into it and you're like, half the time I got into it and I was like, God, if like I wish I'd been at this point. And this case would have never been argued here. This person wouldn't be so hurt and upset and traumatized by this, or the company wouldn't be wasting all this money when their manager just should have treated someone with more respect or should have shared more information, shared more feedback. There were just so many personnel practices that could have been handled better. And that's why ultimately I've gotten into coaching and corporate culture and workplace culture and how to build those is really the crux of most of the work that I do, write about, speak about, coach on, is because of those experiences and seeing how the systems can be improved so everybody has a more meaningful experience. We spend most of our time at work, so it's important.
yeah, I really like the terminology there. And do you, given, I mean, here's a question for you. Given what you saw on the legal side, and as you said, stuck with the facts, it's pretty tangible to kind of bite into. What were some of the things that you maybe learned when getting stuck with the facts that made you make different decisions around when it came to making the facts in a way that was supportive and advantageous to do the right thing?
In some cases, employees hadn't been given enough feedback about why they were being let go. So, as human beings, when we aren't given enough information, we are meaning makers. We look for the story. You could probably think of a time when you're like, oh, well, that person probably did that because I did this, or you make up something. So that happens very much in employment situations. So there was a case, for example, where a guy was suing for age discrimination. When I went and got information from the employer, they had reasonably believable information that the employee was not capable of performing their job at that level anymore. There was a technology gap. Well, in an ideal situation, they might have retrained the employee. They might have done a better job pointing it out, but instead they just laid the person off. And so, we wound up actually settling that one. And I think for a fair amount and getting him the information. But
Mm.
why would you need to go to an attorney? Like that should be, I was lucky that I was able to do that and get him more money than he would have had. And they didn't have to sue because lawsuit litigation. I don't know if you've ever been involved in litigation, but it's extremely expensive and really traumatic, usually for both sides. And usually no one's happy. Either they're unhappy and they're angry because they're suing someone, or they're unhappy that they're being sued and they're having to pay you as an attorney. So it's also not, I didn't find it fun because I don't love arguing. I prefer to solve big problems and come together on them. And if arguing needs to be a part of that, then fine. But I don't like that to always have to be the process. And that is the process. And it's an important one for our justice system. But just for me, it isn't how I wanted to spend my life, just kind of reallocating money. I wanted to reduce that kind of, by the time something gets there, people get really entrenched. And I prefer to be in a working environment where people are working together on building something.
Super interesting. Yeah, no, it's you talked about people being like meaning making, and it seems like when you went into the HR side of things, it's the way you could create meaning and help other people make sense of things and drive maybe clarity at times in the workplace became that, it's just you're on the other side of the coin, and probably refreshing in your own way. So what was, just so for context, you go to a company to work in HR? Like what was the like tangible
I
transition?
did. I went to work for a Superfund cleanup company, Tetra Tech EMI, that does a lot of land cleanup, environmental, which was great. And then after a couple of years there, cutting my teeth and paying my dues in HR, because it was a whole shift and it was a big pay cut, and I needed to learn a lot. And I was very grateful that the organization was willing to bet on me. And I got some HR credentials, and so I kind of went back and got a certification to help do that. And then I was headhunted to a wonderful insurance company, Fireman's Fund, that was owned by one of the top global 20 Allianz insurance companies. And that led to a really beautiful 11-year career, both as an HR business partner, then a corporate HR leading a bunch of initiatives, and then moving back into the law, into the legal department, heading up the first ethics and compliance program there. So that was another pivot where I didn't see the law coming back, but it did in a really unique way. So that was fun. And then I wound up working in healthcare, building a couple more compliance and ethics programs at large companies like McKesson. And then I taught law school for a bit when I was making another pivot. And then I was headhunted out to be a chief administrative officer because I had a broad experience of HR and legal and compliance and some IT in there and other stuff. So I was running about half the company, and then CHRO for a bit. And then I went back to school and became an executive coach.
Boom.
And have been writing a bunch of articles about the things we've been talking about. I wrote a book called The Promotability Index, which breaks down how do you get ahead in organizations, what matters. Have a free assessment that I created for people that they can use, and that's fun. It's kind of my gift to the universe on leveling the playing field, so that because not everybody can see the steps they might need to take at different points in their career. And then I continue to advocate for pay equity and some other areas. So, and
you're all over the topics. So maybe we can dive into the promotability side of things. I think from your kind of expertise as a thought leader and somebody who speaks and coaches and helps supports execs, let's say you're a 28-year-old, 30-year-old, kind of you're at a mid-manager position and you want to be an executive, and what are the things that you should be doing to really work your way up the metaphorical ladder? Like what's important you should be thinking about? How do you go about that?
In the Promotability Index, I reverse engineered promotions into 5 key elements, and people should be working at all of them a little bit. People are at different starting points. The assessment helps you figure that out. But there's self-awareness. So having an accurate awareness of your values, your preferences, how you like to work, what you're good at. The second is external awareness, having an accurate understanding of how your actions impact other people. How do you come off? How do people perceive you? How do they experience you? Do you have situational awareness of that? And can you pivot if someone needs to be influenced in a different way than might be your natural? The third area is strategic thinking. Are you thinking strategically? Do you see outside your vertical so that you have ownership and a mindset that can think in larger systems? That, that's the capacity you look for in an executive, so that they aren't just running sales. They understand what marketing is doing and they partner well with marketing, or they understand HR and why HR is important, or legal compliance and why they could tank the company if they have certain sales practices that are unethical, right? You have to, the higher you go, the more you can't just be thinking about what's on your desk. You have to be thinking about the system.
Hmm.
And of course, any good CEO does that. Then the fourth would be executive presence, which is the ability to influence others and command respect, be listened to, that having gravitas, grace under pressure, having a clear head, making good decisions under stressful circumstances. That's important. And then the fifth is thought leadership. Are you known for something that you're great at? And do you contribute both inside and outside your organization? The higher you go, the more that can raise your profile and also be a very fulfilling thing career-wise in terms of having a network and being recognized for being knowledgeable about something and sharing that knowledge, mentoring others. Those are the types of qualities that I think healthy leadership companies look for when promoting executives. And I don't think that there's any more tangible way that an organization can demonstrate its values than who it promotes and why.
Right. The last part about who it promotes and why. What's that tied to in your list?
Values, corporate values.
Core values. Got it. Those are some phenomenal kind of list of attributes and things that people can have. One of the things I would love to drill into, if you don't mind, is the strategic thinking piece.
Sure.
I find that, at least in our company, to be one of the most important skill sets, given types of work we do, who we work with, what needs to be done. Yet, I also know for myself, my own journey, developing a strategic muscle took a lot of finesse. And I had two different people I worked for really just hammer me on it. What's it take in your eyes for the next generation, for people in their 20s or mid 20s, late 20s who have never been taught to think 5-10 years out or even 6 months out or even 60 days out within their organization? Like, how do you enable that? Because for me, I find that to be, if you do that, you can spot opportunities, you can work across teams, you can, do all the things you said. But like beyond values, like I almost put the strategy piece like right up there next to it as some of the most important things that drive success of an organization. From I haven't done it a lot yet, but like I would have to say, like, strategy is super important to me. How do you enable that across an organization?
Yeah, strategic thinking is one of the toughest ones to learn because you can't do it alone, and you've alluded to that. I think to really think strategically, it requires people to invite you to meetings that are broader, probably broader than your work. It requires people to potentially hand off power to you, to ask you to lead an initiative that's cross-functional, that's outside your comfort zone, that's outside what your potentially written job description is. That's when I found I stretched my strategic thinking muscle, and also making some mistakes, getting hammered for not seeing around the corner, having taken an action that then had a downstream impact or had the optics that I didn't get it, that I didn't understand all the different parts of the organization and how this was going to come across. So I'd say it was a combination of mentoring, mistakes, and being handed opportunities to have that broader skill set to lead a cross-functional initiative. Those experiences, I mentioned when I went into corporate HR, that's when I started to really get that level of expertise, where I was working with communications, I was working with IT, I was working with that really, and having coffee and saying, how does this work? Like, how do you guys just realizing, wow, there's so much more here in this business, so many different pieces, and I need to be thinking about all of them if I'm tasked with this initiative to make sure that it works for everyone and that I'm not adding a lot of cost, adding a lot of headache, unnecessary bureaucracy or process load when I'm creating something. And then you might make a mistake and be like, someone comes to you, oh my God, this is happening. And you're like, okay, I didn't think of that. Then you learn from those things.
I like what you said, though. You said it comes from kind of handing off power, putting people in positions of responsibility, or handing off like delegation of very important pieces to force it create a force.
And then you coach them. I mean, hopefully,
right. It's not like,
you don't like
swim on
push them off
island.
the cliff.
Right. But it's like, here's a bit of a life raft if you need it, but like, make them swim a little bit to like experience the new waters. Got it. Yeah, fascinating.
There's a
Huh.
great quote that one of my mentors, one of my late mentors, David Peterson, who founded the Google, the coaching program at Google, brilliant, brilliant man. He said, "There's no comfort in the learning zone, and there's no learning in the comfort zone."
That's good.
Yeah, and
Oh, that's
so,
really good.
and he's right. And so, I think part of strategic thinking and all this and learning and a growth mindset and is getting out of your comfort zone. Not so you're going to drown, but see if you're uncomfortable. And there's science around when we're doing a task that we know really well, like if you're driving from your house to the pharmacy near you that you go to all the time, sometimes you might not even remember how you got there, right? Like you literally don't remember the drive potentially when we're doing something that we know that's pretty rote, as opposed to if we're learning something new, like you're going to a whole neighborhood you've never been before. Our brain center actually lights up when we have to think about something new, and it's actually dark and it's just kind of dead in there when it's a rote task. Learning new things, getting out of our comfort zone is exciting. It keeps us young. It keeps us learning. I just think it's what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that quote. There's no comfort in the learning zone. There's no learning in the comfort zone. That's good.
Yeah, David Peterson. Yeah,
Where's your article on this? Maybe I've missed it. Come on,
it might be
maybe.
my newsletter.
All
I,
right.
I
Well,
know I've talked about it.
literally add me to it. Good. So Amy, let's talk a little bit about your executive coaching practice. I mean, you've had a windy, very interconnected career, it seems, and you're kind of bringing it all together right now, doing the best of all worlds, which it's neat to marry passions and interests and profit and all the things. But yeah, tell me about like why you like working with leaders. Tell me about, just give me the scoop on you.
Yeah, well, when I took big executive roles, I hired coaches to support me, and so I really enjoyed it. And I have been the type of person that friends usually come to for advice, both being an employment lawyer and having been in HR. If someone gets sideways with their boss or they're having an issue with a difficult coworker and they can't tease it out, and I always felt happy to help out. I enjoyed it, and so it was really a natural, I think, for me to start working as a coach at some point. So I went back to school, I don't know, nine years ago now, to get my coaching credential at the Hudson Institute of Coaching, wonderful school down in Santa Barbara, and then got my coaching hours. And now I'm a professional certified coach, which you get after 500 hours of paid client coaching. And I'm love coaching the C-suite because that's where I can have the most impact because they impact the most lives.
Mm.
I'm coaching a couple of CEOs and a CEO successor right now, and then some general counsel. Since I've been a lawyer, professions tend to be attracted to my work as well as CHROs and other risk management professions. But I also had some heads of revenue and heads of sales and marketing, and it's really about whether the person is all in and
Mm.
is capable of change and brings a lot of heart and a bit of humility, I would say,
Mm.
to the process.
Real quick, I like what you said. You said I was one who always leveraged coaches at different stages for different functions of I think it takes a lot of humility to say I need help, I need a coach, I want to like
Yeah.
where is the pro learning Amy mentality come from? Is that like, hey, am I the great mother? And she's like always said we needed help, like, or you could get help and that's okay. Like why are you, I think it's admirable. Like, why are you such a pro learner and pro like I'll get help. I'll hire this person. Like, where does that come from within you?
That's a really great question because I wouldn't say necessarily it was something I grew up with. I think that the hunger for learning and knowing and understanding probably outweighs the ego. Would be one way for me to think about it. I like to know things. That's definitely kind of a hardwired thing. And so if I don't have it and someone else does, then I don't have a problem with asking to learn. It's kind of like going to school in a way, right? It's just as we get older, there are other ways to learn than going to school.
Mm.
Learn from other people, have a sponsor, have a mentor, have a wonderful network of colleagues we can turn to. We can't be an expert in everything. I think finding the right person that you connect with is important too, right? I wouldn't feel comfortable working with just anyone.
Right.
And who I feel comfortable working with might not be who you feel comfortable working with. Everyone's different and how they're wired. So
You're making you're percolate you're sparking thoughts of people. I think it's such an advantage to advance on the things that you care about in a way that's avoiding a lot of the pitfalls. And it doesn't, to your point, it doesn't mean you're gonna like not make mistakes or do it perfectly.
sure.
But to have a little bit of guidance, I think is so powerful. Speaking of that, like when you're working with the people you are right now and taking all the experience you've had as a coach or being coached, like where do you think you're the most effective? Like there's a lot of coaches out there do a lot of different things across a number of different, industries and niches. Like where would you say you separated yourself, or you think you had the most unique way of working with when someone knocks on your door and says, hey, like I'd love to work with you, and like where do you find yourself the most alive and the most value in the conversation?
I think when there's huge organizational change or disruption and a leader needs to shift either their team to a different strategy, and they might not all be on board. So I do some work with executive teams as well to kind of get everybody comfortable, get the hairballs out on the table, and then start working on them. When there's succession, when a leader needs to be scaled up to take a new role, if someone's retiring or they've decided they've reached the end of the arc with that company and they're leaving, that's really fun to help someone make that transition. Sometimes it's people who are in a first-time C-suite role,
Hmm.
and so they have a much broader span of control, and they need to really level up their mental model of how they operate and delegating and how they hold people accountable and how they motivate and inspire, all of those things being equally important.
Hmm. Coaches enter people's lives at these places of disruption or these places of change, whether that's in a marriage, a business situation, a founder situation. Like, why do you think so many humans struggle navigating change and disruption? What do you find to be common amongst the people in which you work with, where there's gaps in the processing or understanding, or is it just that people need someone next to them to help walk them through to the other side? Or is it like, I'm just curious your perspective on this when it comes to helping people.
We're wired to dislike change. We're wired to try to fight challenges to our stability, and we're wired to be defensive about what we perceive as attacks on who we are as people or our values. And so either of those two things can create a lot of stress, which I think can lead people to then seek support with their therapist, with their pastor, with their religious leader, a coach, health professionals, whatever it is. The challenges, and I recently spoke on a podcast about this for ATD, the Association of Training and Development, is that I think our paradigm is wrong, and we need to actually accept that change is happening all the time, all around us. And if we accept that that is actually the status quo, that change is the status quo, that I hope be less upset and disrupted, less fearful about change, because we will see that things are changing and more quite rapidly all the time because of technology and globalization. But we do have a lizard, a prehistoric kind of mindset that, for whatever reason, is taking a really long time to adapt, in terms of our evolution. So we still have this old brain that
Yeah.
is trying to protect us.
Right.
There's a reason we have it. It's stability can mean survival in a lot of ways, like go back to the cave at night, watch out for falling rocks, not experimenting with everything all the time. But it can hurt us in a modern world where we need to be agile. We need to not be afraid to make a mistake. Someone I respect and admire, Amy Edmondson, who's a wonderful colleague in this, has just written a wonderful book called The Right Kind of Wrong.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I highly recommend you read it. It's around how we need to shift our attitudes towards failure, because that's how we learn. And all the best companies innovate. I mean, if you look at Elon Musk, sure, everybody knows the big successes with it, and there's a ton of failure, and nobody's perfect. Elon, one of the things I think he is good at is accepting failure, and he builds it in and, keeps going, right?
Yeah.
He's not embarrassed by it. He's like, oh yeah, our rocket failed to launch. This is what we're tweaking for next time. It's just like, boom. There's no like big hand wringing, like, right? And that's a good quality for longevity.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, totally. And I think you're right. Having more leaders who publicly accept the failures of certain things they've done. I mean, his rockets. I mean, there's a million reasons though why he should have quit on all of his companies, but has kept going and just going and going. And there's a reason he is where he is. But to your point, yeah, we are hardwired in reptile brains of the past and cause us to do certain things. So yeah, the perspective is really nice. One that you don't hear every day when so many people fail at companies or fail at X, but there's many reasons to keep it going. Amii, when you look at your career, you've done a lot of different things, but it seems like you still got a lot of fuel in the tank, and there's a lot that you is left to be done. Like I can just feel it.
There is.
What's kind of tickling at you of like what else you want to go do? What's ahead for you?
Yeah. Well, I just joined my law firm a year ago, so that's still a big move and pretty new. And balancing that with my coaching business and then my writing that I do and speaking and advocacy work. So that's a juggling act that I'm getting better at. I'd say a couple more years to really feel like I've got the mix mostly where I want it. Although as an entrepreneur, it's not predictable, right? Like in terms of when big projects and things necessarily happen. But I'd like to just keep doing more of the same. My goal is to really make the biggest impact in a positive way that I can, and to take more than I give overall, and then to have meaningful relationships with my family primarily, and then many close friends, and then in terms of putting ideas and helpful things out in the world that increase satisfaction and remove pain as much as possible.
Seems like you have a clear focus on what's in front of you, what's content with like today, but there's more for tomorrow, and you're just taking it as it comes. I should take lessons from you on how to live a simpler.
There's always something interesting around the corner. I think if you say no to the right things.
You say, someone told me that quote where they were talking about dating and blah, blah, blah. And by the way, like, not that this really even matters, but they were like, you say, the right things, the right thing will just pop up in front of you. I was like, it's pretty good actually, because I've barely been out there, but I was like, what's the point of even right now? And so anyways, I agree with like, your boundaries, you say no to the things and the right thing will pop up right in front of you. So here you are.
Yeah. That takes a little bit of time, and sometimes I think you regret things. But if you don't leave space, and I guess that would be my other piece of advice would be, leave 20% space in your life for something, because something will appear that don't like take things that you're not going to enjoy doing, or that aren't going to bring you the money you really need. And don't act in a fear-based way as much as possible, I would say.
Sure. I think we need to send some young execs your way. You're going to show them the joys of life. I'm starting to feel like your vibe, who you're going to help in the next chapter.
Thank you.
Amii, this has been a treat. Where can people find your book, your site, work with you? Tell us more.
I'm super active on LinkedIn. That's really my jam. So I'm happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn. My name is spelled funky, so if you just search AMII, you'll probably find me. Same with on the internet. There's some space thing that's not me, but if you put Amii Coach, you can pretty much find me. And my website is barnardbahn.com, and I post hundreds of resources on my site, in a library, podcasts. This will be going on there. And articles, Harvard Business Review articles. There's a section on my book, and the free leadership assessment is on there as well. So pretty much everything's there. And then for my law firm, it's Kaplan Walker.
Right.
So
she's the real deal, everybody. Pay attention.
Thanks. Thanks,
Amii,
Brian.
thanks for doing this. It's been so
Yeah,
fun.
thanks for
getting to know
inviting
you.
me.
Yeah, it's fun. Thank you. Thank you for joining me on the One Away Show. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, please leave a review and follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Have a one away moment you'd like to share? Follow me on Twitter or Instagram at BrianWish_, or reach out to me on LinkedIn and tell me about the moment that altered your life. The One Away Show is produced by Arcbound, a company dedicated to helping entrepreneurs, experts, and visionaries launch authentic personal brands. From message development to podcast production, social media content generation, and book writing, we work with you to create your arc. Head to arcbound.com to learn more. Thank you for listening, and please join me next time on The One Away Show.